Hey everyone, welcome to HashiTalk India 2023. Namaste. Thank you so much for joining me for this talk today on getting started with Terraform on AWS in right way. As you know, Terraform is an open source infrastructure as a code tool that supports multiple cloud providers, for example, AWS, Azure, GCP. So today we will talk about how to kickstart your Terraform journey on AWS in right way. So are you excited? All right, let's go ahead. Okay, before we dive in, let me introduce myself. My name is Preeti Pragya, and I am a technical architect at Tata Consultancy Services. I like to wear multiple hats, and that way I work in backend development and I do architecture as well. Apart from that, I have been quite involved in DevOps work, and as you can see, I am an AWS community builder in DevOps. Apart from usual work, I do blogging, and I'm a co-founder of Cloud Katha, a cloud computing blog where you will be seeing mostly the articles related to cloud and different cloud-related technologies. Okay, so what's the agenda? As you might have guessed, it's all about starting with Terraform on AWS in right way. So we'll discuss about all the why, how, benefits, best way, and everything that helps us. Okay, so before we start with Terraform, let me give a little bit of overview on infrastructure as a code. A fundamental principle of DevOps says that you should treat your infrastructure the same way you treat your code. That means you have to version control your code. You need to write unit test against it. You need to, do all that you do with your code and with your performing all those that you perform in your code. So what infrastructure as a code helps you is it lets you provision and manage your infrastructure as a code. That means you can use code to create the same server that you created once 20 times or maybe 1,000 times. So it boosts your productivity because you automate things. Then, because you have automated your infrastructure, you create the same kind of configuration every 1,000 times that you create. That means there is no chance for configuration drift. And having said that, it also eliminates the possibility of a human error. Talking about the various ISC tool available on AWS, AWS has their in-house tool, for example, CloudFormation, SAM, that is mostly used for serverless, AWS CDK. Then coming to, there are external tools like Terraform, AWS CDK for Kubernetes, CDK for Terraform, Ceph, Puppet, and Ansible, etc. So having said there are so many tools, why go for Terraform? You might have a question, right? So few of the things that interest me are the Terraform is open source and it has a wide community that helps and support the Terraform and creating the different kind of provider that you have. And that's how, as of now, there are thousands of provider written by HashiCorp or the community. So, there is a huge support in case you need. And one of the most enabler of Terraform is that it supports multiple cloud providers. So you can create your server in AWS and point that into using a CNAME in Azure. That's quite possible. And that's the beauty of Terraform, my friend. Apart from that, the Terraform syntax HCL is quite easy to use and less error prone. So why should we not use Terraform? Okay, so how Terraform works. If we see what we do to create a simple resource in Terraform, as a practitioner, you create or you represent your resource declaratively in your Terraform configuration file. And after that, you do simple init, as you might know, to download the provider specific code. And once done, then you run Terraform plan that will show you what exactly you are trying to create or update or remove or whatever. So if you are happy with the plan, you can go ahead and do Terraform apply, and that's when Terraform is going to create your declared resource in your specified provider, which can be anything like AWS, Google, Cloud, etc. And you will have your infrastructure ready in no time. Okay, so how do we get started with Terraform on AWS? If you have worked on AWS, you would have noticed that if you work with CloudFormation, you don't have to install anything. All you need to do is you just go and create a stack using your specified provider. But with Terraform, you have to install Terraform. Okay, so you can install Terraform from the official website that I have mentioned over here. Once you go there, you will see that there are various options of installation, like manual installation, and there are various options of operating systems as well. So depending on what's your operating system, if you are on Mac, you can also use Homebrew. If you are on Windows, you can either manually install it, or you can use Chocolatey as a package if you already have to install it as well. Okay. The next part, which is authenticating with AWS, and it is one of the most important part when it comes to creating a Terraform resource. So Terraform creates your resource by interacting with AWS API. And of course, for security reason, you can't interact with AWS API without providing your credentials. So you have to authenticate with AWS in order to create any API that you want. And for that, HashiCorp provides a lot of different ways in which it can find your configuration. For example, you can provide your access key and secret key in the provider configuration. It can look for the credential in environment variable or shared credential file or config file. If you are using container, then it uses container credential or on EC2 instance profile. So it all depends on where you are trying to create your resources. All right. Based on that, there are three recommended way. Okay, if you are working on your local system, go for installing AWS CLI and run AWS configure to configure your AWS CLI with your credential. If you are running Terraform on a container, then your container role is sufficient to provide all the authentication information for Terraform to be able to create it. And similarly for EC2, you can use EC2 instance profile. So let's see how you can do a local setup. Before you can set up your credential, you need to have a Terraform user or an access and secret key setup, right? Okay. So you can navigate to IAM and create a Terraform user. I have named it Terraform, but you can name it anything. It's up to you. Then here, as you can see, in the select AWS credential type, choose only access key as programmatic access. Do not consider the password or AWS management console access. You don't need your Terraform user to log into your console and perform some manual operation, do you? Of course not. So choose this and click next on permission. And to start with, you can go ahead with administrator access because Terraform needs to create different kind of resources and you don't know in beforehand what's the permission. So choose administrative access and go ahead with creating a user. But remember, in long run, this is not you should be doing. You should follow the principle of least privilege. Okay. So if you know that your Terraform user is only going to create S3 bucket, provide only S3 related permission to your Terraform user, right? Click next, and then your user is created. Once your user is created, you will see that you get an option to download your credential. So download your CSV from here and you will get your credentials downloaded. Mind it, never ever show your access key or secret key to someone or share it with them, because your access key and secret key can be gateway for the malicious kind of people to hack your account or to create different kind of bills for you that you won't like. So secure your access key and secret key, and never ever commit it into a version control system. Okay, so you have downloaded the credential. Now is the time to set up your credential. The simplest way that comes to your mind when you are working with Terraform is simply put your access key and secret key in the AWS provider. But remember, I just said that you are not supposed to commit your Terraform access key and secret key into the version control system. And remember, IAC is all about doing version control and creating consistent architectures. So of course, you are going to upload your Terraform code into the version control system. So never ever provide your access key and secret key in AWS provider. So what should you do? The recommended way, let's find out. So it is to install and configure AWS CLI on your system. That way, what will happen is, once you do AWS CLI install, the CLI will create the AWS secret key and access key. And in the config, it will create your reason and the output JSON. So your access key and your secret key are more secret, and it gets created as part of the credentials filter. However, the lesser secretive things are your reasons or your output format that goes into the config. So how do you configure your AWS CLI? First, you can install your AWS CLI v2 from the document that is provided over here for your operating system, and then run AWS configure command. Once you run AWS configure command, it will prompt you to provide your AWS access key ID or secret key ID, default reason name, and output format. All right. Don't worry for these access key and secret key. These are dummy anyways. As I told you, we are not supposed to see your access key and secret key, right? Then if you provide your default reason name, by default, Terraform is going to create your resources in that reason name if you don't provide any in the provider section. So the question comes, is AWS configure the best way using your access key and secret key? I would say if you are starting, it's well enough to get you started, okay? But going forward, I won't highly recommend it because lately AWS also don't recommend to use static credentials. That is your access key and secret key. And the recommended way is to use AWS SSO or the IAM Identity Center to configure your CLI. Okay, so this is not the scope of this talk, but I have given a link to the documentation that implements it. So I would highly recommend you to check later on how you can implement SSO with your CLI to create and manage your Terraform resources. All right. Okay, so when you are creating your first resources, how it goes? I have mentioned the steps. We are already on step 3 where we are authenticating with AWS using AWS CLI. So what would you do? Next, you can create a very simple Terraform configuration file specifying a simple S3 bucket, and then you can run Terraform commands, which are like init, plan, apply, destroy. These are, on the core of the Terraform. Okay. So let's see here. As you can see, I have created a main.tf, which has a very, very simple S3 bucket. As you can see, there is a resource AWS S3 bucket type, and the name is demo bucket. This is not the name of the bucket. This is the name of the S3 bucket resource. The name of the bucket I have provided is CK demo bucket 04. So what I have done, I have just provided the Terraform declaration with the provider, which provider I am using. Then next, I am providing that how Terraform should authenticate with that provider. I have specified the default profile. And mind it, if you are not creating a named profile while creating or while configuring your AWS profile, it gets created as default profile. So if you configure your AWS profile, usually your default profile gets created. And Here you can specify your AWS reason. Remember, you specified a reason while configuring AWS CLI as well. You can override that over here. If you want to create a CLI not in a default reason but in a different reason altogether, you can override that configuration over here. So once you have a very simple Terraform configuration, the next is to do Terraform init. What does Terraform init do? Now, Terraform is a modular architecture and it only contains the Terraform binary, only contains the required code for doing the different API and all, but it does not contain any provider specific code. And it's good in a way, because you don't want the binary to have thousands of providers, do you? I'm sure no. So when you do Terraform init, by looking at your configuration file, Terraform figure out that which provider you are working with. And then it downloads all the provider specific code so that you can work with that provider. So once we run Terraform init, it says initializing the backend and initializing the provider plugin. You see, reusing previous version of HashiCorp AWS from the dependency log, whatever. So it is downloading the HashiCorp AWS provider details. And the important thing is you only do it once in your Terraform project, because once you have downloaded the provider specific code, you don't need to re-download it, right? Unless the provider version you are changing or anything else you are changing, you only need to do it once. So once you have done with you are done with Terraform init, you can run Terraform plan. Terraform plan is nothing but it lets you what you are going to create. For example, in our case, it says Terraform will perform the following action. AWS S3 bucket dot demo bucket will be created. And that's what we exactly want. We want to create an AWS S3 bucket. So Terraform will say that in the plan that what it is going to add. And so if you are happy with your Terraform plan, you can go ahead and you can do Terraform apply. So Terraform apply is the command that is actually going to create your resources on your provider, in our case, AWS. So you see, it will ask to prompt you that do you want to perform these actions? Only yes will be accepted to approve. So type yes and hit enter. And within no time, it starts creating your resource. See, AWS S3 bucket is still creating, and then creation completed after 12 seconds. Apply complete, resource to added. So that's how it got created. So now you have created your first resource on AWS. All right. So I'm telling you some of the important commands that will be useful while you are working with Terraform. So we have already talked about init, plan, apply. A validate is the command that lets you validate beforehand that if your Terraform configuration is going to work on or not. And that way it helps you find out error early in your life cycle. And that's really good. Then comes Terraform destroy. As you might have already guessed, Terraform destroys or deletes any infrastructure that you have created. All right. This is very handy, and very important point. If you are creating your resources for learning purpose, always make sure to run Terraform destroy by the end of the your POC or whatever you are doing, so that you don't leave any of the resources running in your account and be soaked with the end moment dollars in the bill. Okay. Next, there are Terraform FMT, which formats your code. For example, if you have written your code which is zigzag and not written in a well-defined format, so you can format your code using Terraform FMT. It helps in increasing the readability and maintaining the code for better. Then Terraform version, it lets you know which version of the Terraform you are running. And then Terraform import lets you import your already existing resources in your account into the Terraform. Now, Those were not the only commands that is available over Terraform. There are many more. So all you can need to do is type Terraform in your command line and hit enter. Terraform is going to show you all the available command that is present over there. So if you can see here, it is showing the main commands are init, validate, plan, apply, and destroy. And we have already talked about it. If you see for all the command, it is showing a small description as well that what this command is supposed to do. And then there are some other commands as well that you can use, and then you can read about the description what these commands are used for and use it as per your convenience. What next? Okay, so because Terraform does not enforce you to use a ID, you can get started with a simple Notepad or Notepad++ or any simple editor that you would like, right? But in that case, your notepad your editor is not going to prompt you that what you should create when you have, it's not going to give you auto suggestions or, to help you improve your productivity while you are creating your Terraform resource. So I highly recommend the official Terraform plugin, which is HashiCorp Terraform, to download. That will help you in syntax highlighting and auto completion for Terraform. It also helps you in one more thing, which I'm going to tell you in the upcoming slides. Okay, so as I said, auto suggestion. See, as soon as you type resource AWS underscore Dyna, it lets you know all the available AWS resources that starts with AWS Dyna. That means it gives you auto suggestion. And my friend, this saves a lot of time and also the trip to back and forth going to documentation to see what are the available resource or the parameter and then configure it. So it is going to be your savior while you are working with Terraform. So always, I recommend to use VS Code with this plugin for your Terraform development when you are actually serious about developing on Terraform. Like, Notepad or Notepad++ is okay for your first POC or your learning time. But once you get serious, I would highly recommend you to get install VS Code and then use your the auto suggestion and other benefit that it has to provide. Formatting your Terraform code automatically. Few slides ago, I talked about formatting your code using Terraform FMT. That's a manual action. You need to, run the Terraform FMT in order to format your code. That's okay. It's just a simple command. But still, as a developer, I always prefer to format my command on saving the file. For example, I have done the give it is kind of formatting, but all I would like to do is I do control save and magic. Your code is formatted with a beautiful layout and all that is required for better readability, right? So your Terraform extension is going to help you in that as well. Let me tell you how. You open the settings in VS Code and search for format. In the format, here, check this thing as format a file on save. But if you are reading this says a formatter must be available. The file must not be saved after delay and the editor must be not be shutting down. So for this format on save to work, you have to choose a formatter, right? Let's go ahead and do that. Search for the formatter in your settings again, and in your default formatter, choose HashiCorp Terraform. And as soon as you choose your formatter and do your uh, format on save, you can test the formatting. For example, see how I have just made some gibberish kind of indentation in this my DynamoDB resource creation main.tf, and for to test it, do these kind of random changes and hit Control S, and that's when your code gets formatted on save. See how beautiful it looks. So coming to that was about the formatting. So by now you are able to create your first resource on AWS using the best practices for authentication, staying secure by using AWS CLI, and never ever providing your AWS secret key and access key in your provider block, right? Let's see some other AWS general guidelines and best practices that you should follow. Never use your root credential for Terraform or any other work. Do not share your credential with anyone else. And a small tips is whenever you are going to implement a Terraform feature in your project, you don't know already, right? That what are the different available, parameters that you should configure. So go in console, create an EC2 instance, see what are the various options that you need to enable, and then note down the configuration that you are doing. And after that, implement the same using Terraform. It does help, it has helped me. So I think, I hope it's going to help you as well. Then, as I already said, destroy your resource if you are doing just for learning purpose. And last but not the least, sorry, always set up billing alarm in your AWS account to avoid last minute billing shocks. Okay. You can set up an alarm to intimate you via email that, okay, as soon as I reach $1 of spend, intimate me because I don't want to get billed unnecessary. Right. So you should always set a billing alarm, especially when you are a learner. All right. So these are some of the resources that can help you going forward. You have started your journey, you have created your first resource. Then your go-to resource will be official documentation. Whichever resource that you want to create, always follow the documentation. You can also check out HashiCorp Learn website. And there is really a good book, Terraform Up and Running, that helps. And to get started with Terraform in right way, I have written a blog post as well that you can follow. All right. So if you have any question, feel free to drop in the comments and I'll be happy to answer. Or you can also connect me with at my blog or my Twitter, LinkedIn handle, or you can email me at the specified email. Thank you.